I hereby call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. This evening there are 4 items on tonight's general agenda. There's an item discussing an ordinance amending Chapter 74 of the City Code relating to skateboarding and skating. There's an item considering items related to the successful outcomes after release grant. Another item discussing a resolution improving a City of Winston-Salem former offender work experience program. And lastly on the agenda, there's a resolution approving the Solomon Drive traffic calming plan for funding and construction. Items on the consent agenda will be unanimously approved unless a council member wishes to be pulled for discussion. Council members, with that being said, I'd like to have item C3 pulled for brief discussion. If there is no more discussion, I'd approve a motion.
I want to have C4 and C5 pulled, please.
So we've got C3, C4, C5.
If there are no other, I move for approval.
Second.
It's a motion and properly second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item C3.
Item C3, ordinance amending Chapter 78 of the City Code relating to the operation of golf carts on city streets.
Council members, we have reviewed this item at length, and I know we've had a lot of discussion about it. I think generally we all believe this is something that should go forward. Just wanted to bring to your attention some of the adjustments that were made. We discussed rules and regulations, where, how, and what times operation of golf carts can occur. We've also discussed inspection fees. Inspection fees will be $15, as you know, and $10 for re-inspections. Charges for services look to be $3 per rider, up to $3 per rider. I know there was some conversation centered around signage. Businesses and phone numbers on carts can exceed 12-inch letters. As far as enforcement is concerned and exemptions, we are well aware of what those goals and qualifications are. Does anybody have anything they wish to discuss or say at this time before we move forward? I know this is something pretty huge. Councilmember McIntosh is recognized.
I do still have concerns about the limit, about us setting limits on the dollar amount. I don't think it's necessary at this point. I think it potentially will keep entrepreneurs from finding other methods and other models to use. I don't think we have the experience to know whether the number we've come up with is a good number or not. I'm going to vote for it, but my preference would be not to have that dollar amount set by us.
Well, and I think your preference is duly noted. And what we've said here is up to $3. Business owners may charge nothing, $1, $2, but I think it's probably good just to set a benchmark. We can always come back and adjust it, but I think your comments are duly noted. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on that matter? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Move for approval?
Second.
Motion and properly second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. Item C4.
Item C4, resolution authorizing an agreement with West and STEM PLLC for professional architectural design services for the renovation of a building to serve as a police district office at 1517 Waltown Street.
Councilman Burke is recognized.
Yes, this is directed to the city manager. It concerns, we've spent a lot of time talking about minority, diversity, and people that we get to do our business. It's important for us to have some comments. Have we done all we can as far as?
Councilman Burke, this one and the next item are both architectural services items that we sent out for proposals with a new process. Out of the points that we use to evaluate, we're not allowed by state law or federal law to evaluate them on cost, so we have to look at other criteria, professional services criteria. But we changed our process, and specifically after council objected to this previous item 2 or 3 months ago, we changed our process and added 2 new sections so that out of the 100 points, 20 points is associated with minority and women business good faith efforts. These firms actually exceeded the 10% requirement. We also added another 20 points for response time to the job site. Arguing, and I think it's a fair argument, that a firm out of Charlotte is not as responsive to one of these sites for construction management as a firm local. So both of these, this one and the next one, both are under our new process, and they meet the goals. They're using more than 10% minority participation, and they're also local vendors.
Thank you. You have answered for 5, and I just want to say to the city manager that I do appreciate you evaluating your departments, that you have been aggressive and letting them understand they're not going to do business as usual. And I want you to know how I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think the citizens, the taxpayers can appreciate it too. I've said on many occasions, we have taxpayers who have worked hard. They have been downsized. They've had good jobs, and we don't look at our own taxpayers to try to get them to opportunities. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move for the approval of that one.
Okay, Councilmember
And
Burke.
five.
Okay, I was just about to ask. So it's been moved to approve C4 and C5. Can I get a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, that is unanimous. We'll move on to the general agenda, item G1.
Item G1, ordinance amending Chapter 74 of the City Code relating to skating and skateboarding.
All right, and giving us a brief report, I believe, will be Attorney Carmen.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor. This item was brought to committee last month. Basically, it extends the prohibition on skating, skateboarding from not only the Central Business District, but also to the Central Industrial District. There was concern expressed by Wake Forest Innovation Quarter with respect to damaged property due to skateboarding, and the request came from the mayor and that entity to add the Central Business District, the Central Industrial District to the prohibition. I think there's a representative here from Wake Forest Innovation Quarter in case there are questions.
All right, and while we're getting ready to talk about questions and concerns, I will say that nobody has signed up on the sign-in sheet to speak. Anyone who wishes to speak can kind of show by raising your hand, and we'll get general consensus on the committee to allow time to do so. But members of the committee, we've talked about this last month. It's back in committee this month. I understand that there are some other options that we may be able to talk about. Attorney Carmen, will it be you or the city manager? I'm seeing here in my report that there are apparatuses that are used periodically in other places to stop skateboarders from skateboarding in certain areas. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I think Mr. Turner will
Mr.
talk
Turner,
to you about
please.
that.
Mr. Chairman, in response to a request from Councilmember McIntosh, we did look at whether there are devices to stop shredding, which is the activity that is of concern that causes damage to walls, rails, and steps from skateboarding activity. And these devices that we found are available. They are typically screwed in or glued into the wall structure, leaving a small nodule or bump so that the shredding activity is uncomfortable, therefore undesirable for the skateboarders to continue to use that site. Rough estimates of the installation cost are around $700 per installation, where that would cover one flight of stairs or approximately 100 foot of wall or similar structure. We have seen these types of devices used at facilities. Here in Winston, we found it at the former Wachovia, current Wells Fargo site across the street. We've seen them in other cities and large metropolitan areas where they have a greater concentration of skateboarders and skateboarding activity. Be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman McIntosh, since your name was mentioned, we'll start to the right and just work our way around if anybody has questions.
Yeah, I guess, Mike, I've got two concerns. One is that the cost of remediating the problem that way through the use of those would be borne by the Innovation Quarter folks as it's proposed now. And from talking to them, that's a fairly significant amount of money. So I do have a concern that that's going to place a fairly significant burden on them. On the other hand, I'd turn around and I wonder how efficient it will be for us to enact an ordinance that will have any teeth in it. How will an ordinance banning that really keep people off the surfaces of the Innovation Quarter? Will it be effective? So those are my concerns on both sides of it. I'm open to answers on either one or both of them.
Councilman Burke?
Well, I will say this, and I do appreciate and respect the innovation people. They've done a very good job. It's beautiful down there, and I think people want to take care of their property. But also, it may be high, but sometimes you pay a price in order to take care of what you have. And I think the innovation people should understand that. And I speak all the time about the beauty of that place and how it's just added so much to our city. It does not take anything away from you, from the innovation group. But I would not, when you were talking about Who would you want to bear that expense?
I don't have an answer to that. I just posed the question.
Because I know we taxpayers, we can't bear it.
It's only there's only two entities at the table, either the innovation corridor or the city. And Mr. City Manager, and I'll come back around to you to talk about what we're doing as a city to address skateboarding and those who are interested in the sport. But I'll go to Councilmember Light.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The more I've thought about this, the more I have had a problem with banning skateboarding, just simply because that's what kids want, the freedom to skateboard. And if, in fact, as this shows, as Mr. Turner told us, that there is a way to protect certain surfaces, I think the sidewalks and whatever ought to be allow skateboarding. I feel like, you know, you're infringing on the freedom of the kids to enjoy themselves. In fact, I would go even further and encourage the Innovation Quarter to add skateboarding amenities to that wonderful park they're building right now. So I definitely will vote against extending the ban to the Central Industrial District.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Yes, as I'm not a member of the Public Safety Committee, but I appreciate the opportunity to have input. It's, as I've stated in the last committee meeting, my struggle with banning skateboarding in those areas. I understand Innovation Quarter's position on that, but I'm challenged to the point that Councilman McIntosh stated. When we put this in place, how is it actually enforced to say when those individuals out there, the bike patrol will now be on skateboarding patrol to, you know, keep the folk from skateboarding, and then that time we're going to arrest the kid for skateboarding in a place that they shouldn't be skateboarding. And I know that we're looking at the skate park and those other things, and maybe that will assist in that, but how, in the long term, how does that really balance out by putting it in place? Does that achieve the goal that Innovation Quarter wants, which is to protect the property, rightfully so, to protect it from damage, but does this actually go to achieve that goal? And then my points were, in the last conversation, were much to the point that Councilmember Light just made, that on one of the consent items which was discussed, we're now allowing golf carts on the street. We allow segways on the sidewalks, but no skateboarding on there. So how do we, what's the rationality in terms of the biggest piece that it causes damage? Okay, so in protecting those surfaces, does putting the ordinance in place actually protect the property? And I'm not sure that that actually does that.
Well, I think destruction of property is illegal in any sense of the imagination, any stretch. What it sounds to me, the general tone of the conversation, we may want to hold this item in committee as I look at the folks who are here from the Innovation Quarter. And, Mr. City Manager, if you will meet with staff and those who represent the Innovation Quarter, let's see if we can come up with some innovative ways to partner on some of these suggestions that are being presented to us. I always say it's better to measure 10 times and cut once. We can always enact an ordinance. We can always enforce what we have on the books, but let's see what we can do leading up to that point. If it has to come back to us for consideration, I think it may be wise to attack it at this time, but let's look at what else we can do before we move forward. Is that the general consensus of the committee?
But may I just ask a question?
Councilmember Burke.
Have we made an effort for people to do skateboarding in some places in this city?
I meant to come back to the manager. Thank you for bringing that up.
Councilman Burke, we are working on establishing a permanent skateboarding park. It's taking longer than I would have preferred. It'll be the spring before we actually have this site prepared. But we had a temporary site over the summer, which was very successful. And once we have a permanent site, we want to market that through recreation. I do think that will help if there is a place that kids and adults, because there are plenty of adults who skateboard, where they are encouraged to go skateboard. There's a place for family members, some benches and other things to make it a real amenity for the city. So I think that will help. The other thing we can do is explore some partnerships with the research park to look at how we could partner with them on maybe some pilot efforts on some of these enhancements to stop the grinding on the rails. Some of the property actually, and most of the property actually, is in the city right of way, so we could look at maybe sharing that cost with them.
Yes. Now, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee and the city manager and your staff, I believe that people ought to have freedom. But I want to tell you something right now. There are some people who will just take advantage of opportunities and be very disrespectful. You watch them, how they use those skateboards or any of these other things that we talk about. And I don't believe that our police department is going to be in the business of trying to do a lot of enforcement because we have them to do other things. And so if you could have people who are going to be polite and courteous and respectful and know how to treat things the right way, that's a different story. Now, you put them all out there with those skateboards, and I tell you what you're going to have. You're going to have a whole lot of problems. And I think also as we look at this, we need to let our recreation department get a little more involved with some recommendations and suggestions on how we will work with people who want to do the skateboarding. Thank you.
Well, Councilmember Montgomery.
It's just I don't want the picture to be painted that is not respecting the requests and the thoughts from Innovation Quarter. Just the other day, getting on Silas Creek Parkway, and this is getting on the expressway. Somebody skateboarding off the side of the expressway onto the other side, and I know that has to be illegal to do that. And so, but that didn't stop them from doing that. So let's look at what's going to stop them from doing it instead of just putting something in place and hope that it stops them from doing it.
And I do want to bring up the fact that the way we approached the West End situation was to contact people who were active in that particular group of skaters. And I don't know what our outreach efforts have been like or what the possibility is of doing that, but I think if we can find somebody to bring to the table and offer a little carrot stick and say, guys, if the behavior continues, then there's going to be some sort of crackdown. This is not going to be available to you going forward. We may get some behavioral modification there.
All right, in the city, I think it's clear we want to encourage skateboarding. We want our youth to do productive things. We want to discourage damage to property. That's not good for the city. It's not good for the youth or anybody else who may participate in skateboarding. And it sounds to me like we're going to be a little bit diplomatic about the process. So, Mr. Manager, if you'll keep us updated. All right, segmenting to item G2, and I'll have you read it in 1 second. Earlier this year, as we were getting our paperwork together, February the 1st, 2014, we hosted a Stop the Violence community forum where the community was able to come out and talk a little bit about their concerns and come up with innovative ways and concepts on how to improve on reducing violence in the community. I think that particular forum set our direction for this committee for the next 3 years, and I think we'll be able to build on some of the good work that Mayor Pro Tem Burke and the previous committees have started. But the overall takeaway from the Stop the Violence Forum from the community, from the feedback and all the comments was, number one, that we need funding for more programs that serve our community youth and our former offender population. And two, we need to take an approach to reducing crime by providing opportunities for former offenders to be able to work and productively and earn an income for their families. So out of these particular objectives, the SOAR initiative, or Successful Outcomes After Release initiative, was created. It was born, and it is a dual initiative that pretty much addresses both of those particular objectives in 2 equal parts, and item G2 is the first part in that process. Item G2, please.
Item G2, consideration of items relating to the Successful Outcomes After Release grant. A, resolution approving the recommendations for award of Successful Outcomes After Release program grants. B, ordinance amending the annual appropriation and tax levy ordinance for the fiscal year 2014 and 2015. And C, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Thank you. And I want to say before you begin, Mr. Riley, Ms. Pam Peoples-Joyner, the two of you have been extremely helpful in moving this forward. And Mr. Riley, you've been stellar. And thank the both of you for your work on this project. Mr. Evan Riley is recognized.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor and members of the committee.
Good evening.
As you alluded to, Councilmember Taylor, the council back in June elected to set aside funding in the amount of $100,000 in support of the Successful Outcomes After Release Offender Reentry Initiative. Those funds were to be used for grants to support programs that work with the former offender population, doing vocational, educational, therapeutic, and other sorts of training to better that community. We released an RFP for a grant for organizations who worked in that space in August to submit proposals to us for grant funding. And we received 7 applications. We had an internal committee that was chaired by Councilmember Taylor review those applications. And you can see before you there the recommendations for allocation of funding in the amount of $50,000. And you see the organizations listed there. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Members of the committee, we went over these details with a fine-tooth comb. It took us a long time to get where we are now, and these are our recommendations. And I know the key number here is $50,000. Initially, $100,000 was allocated, but the next item will talk a little bit about what happened to the other $50,000. I think we did something innovative as well with it. So, does anyone wish to be recognized for discussion? Councilmember Burke.
In listening to Mr. Raleigh, I believe that, did you tell us this money that's been allocated and who's getting this money?
Certainly, I'd be happy. Again, this is just a recommendation from the Internal Review Committee to the Public Safety Committee for allocation. The organizations are the Salvation Army with recommended funding in the amount of $5,000, the Piedmont Triad Regional Council of Governments with recommended funding in the amount of $5,000, Self-Incorporated, the recommended funding is $30,000. That's actually $10,000 for the organization itself. $10,000 that will be funneled through Self for Project More, and then another $10,000 to Self to administer the grant to beating up bad habits. Eureka Ministry Incorporated, it was recommended for funding in the amount of $10,000, and I believe that's all.
In looking at this report, when we talk about giving tax dollars here, I believe that the taxpayer would like to know more than just what we would see here. You may have had an opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to review this as the chairman of this committee, but see, I have not been given an opportunity to know what they actually really do, see? Now, you just don't talk about tax dollars. And I've been one of the strongest people talking about how we help minorities, how we help people who have had problems coming back in. But these dollars are too important for me to get a report like this when I don't even know, as an elected official, that I can't even explain to some people in detail. So, Mr. Raleigh, what I think you should do, if you have that, we're not against the program. We're just for an understanding of the program.
And I should have made mention, Councilmember Burke, that I do believe we have representatives from all of the organizations that have been recommended for funding here with us this evening. But I certainly will include that information for you, but just wanted to make note of that.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, so we can understand this clearly, and let me make myself clear again. Mr. City Manager, when reports are given, this is a new report. When this was brought to us through the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, who worked very hard to get this before us, and we supported it in the budget, this amount of money. So it's not that we are against what is happening, it's just that you need to have a better understanding when you stand up here and give a report other than to just put a name and the amount. It needs to be defined clearly. Is it there somewhere?
Yeah, Councilmember Burke, like I said, we went over this with a fine-tooth comb. There is a huge notebook with all of the information on every one of these particular organizations. And I do just want to point out that, this money came through us through the grantee agency process, and there were hundreds of thousands of dollars, well over $1 million, that were allocated to several other organizations that did not receive the same scrutiny and detail that we've given to this particular program. I know that the staff will be happy to provide that to you if we move forward today by Monday. But I do understand your point. If it comes to the council, it needs to be right, it needs to be detailed so everybody can see it. But I assure you, as the chairman of the committee, that we did take a look at it and we did what was right and necessary.
That's fine. You heard me.
That was an oversight. We should have put, as we talked about with those other items earlier today on the Finance Committee agenda, we should have had a paragraph for each one, what the agency is, and specifically, as we have all that information, what they're going to do with the money. So
yeah, it's no problem. I want to make it clear again. I have no problem with what you're doing, but I think when we give out this, So it will not be problems with taxpayers who will question what we're doing. They have it right there so they can see it.
Yes, ma'am. Can we have that information by Monday, or as soon as possible?
It'll be in your Thursday packet.
Thank you. Councilmember Light.
I was just going to say that we should just pass it along, perhaps without a recommendation, so that we can consider it Monday after we get the information.
Councilmember Montgomery.
In reference to some of the organizations that are here, I have questioned in the past, particularly our support of programs and the actual impact that some of those programs that we already financially support and what are actually being achieved by those. I think many of these are great, and I'm really looking forward to what we're going to do through the former offender work experience program. I think that has grand opportunity to have potential to help individuals who, one, can't get the job because of their history, but giving them that work experience that'll help them into the opportunities in the future and really helping in that transition. But for some of the others who have had history, particularly I'm looking at the COG in particular. I've asked questions in the past, and I think Councilman Light is our representative there. But I've asked questions in terms of how our process and what we work with there and what we get back, and never really gotten clear understanding in terms of what we're getting back in that process, in terms of particularly that workforce development portion that takes place through there. That goes back to the conversation we had during finance in reference to what are we preparing them for, and are we preparing individuals for the jobs that are the future of our economy here, or are we preparing them for things that don't help them to move up from where they are? And I think that's something we have to look at. How are we actually helping them to move into careers and jobs that will help them to promote up, rather than just leaving them at the same status that they are? And that's something I think we need to work through, particularly in that area. And that organization was one that I asked those questions about, and I didn't get a clear response.
And the representatives from pretty much all the groups are present, and if the committee is okay with that, we'll have them to say who they are, who they represent, a little bit about the organization. So be getting your mind right and get ready to move to the podium. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Councilmember Light.
Well, certainly with this comment, and just a reference to the COG, they have an impressive, program in after release program, and I'm sure that they would be more than delighted to present all of the different areas that they work in. So if we could get Matthew sometime.
Actually, Mr. Page and I were talking about this morning, reviewing the strategic plan of City Council, and we've got on there to ask Mr. Doles to come in and to make a presentation specifically on workforce development and where they're spending the money that we've allocated through the federal and state government to them.
And one of the things we wanted to be cognizant of, we wanted to fund groups and organizations that were historically overlooked and those who we felt like would actually move the needle. Because if you notice here, the Salvation Army and the COG are two organizations that are extremely reputable. Everybody knows who they are, what they do, but yet they receive less than some of the other organizations. We wanted to make sure that we were moving the needle, and actually, not that the Salvation Army and the COG does not, because we know that they do. We got the chairwoman of the board right here. We wanted to make sure we were definitely making a difference for those who were overlooked in the past. So the COG has been mentioned. So if you just go ahead and come forward, give us your name and your address, and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Good evening. My name is Michael Thomas. I'm the Project Reentry Program Coordinator for the Piedmont Triad Regional Council under the Criminal Justice Department, Matthew Doles and Robin Howe. I work out of Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, 2701 University Parkway, Winston-Salem, 27105.
Tell us a little bit about, what you do, and, the money is being allocated to you. What are you looking to do with it?
Okay, the largest part, and I heard you mention 5,000, but the largest part, which has changed over the years, is the transportation. We are a pre to post-release program, meaning that we work currently in 13 North Carolina prisons, preparing, that's 2 female prisons as well, but we prepare individuals who have 6 to 12 to 18 months left on their active sentence. We prepare them for release by participating in a 16-week pre-release program. Once they successfully complete the pre-release program, what that means is they have earned post-release services. So Project Reentry is the only program of its kind in North Carolina that provides the bridge from the Department of Public Safety to the community. What we have found is that upon release, transportation is one of the key issues. And as a result of some late meetings in late 2013 and early meetings in 2014, that what was once donated to the various organizations working with former offenders, such as 30-day bus passes, are now required that we have a 50% match. So this, Art Barnes brought to all of our attention who were at the various meetings. And that's going to be key because transportation is key to securing employment here in Winston-Salem. That was in our submission as part of what we aim to continue to have, because most of the Project Reentry pre-release participants are securing employment within 30 days of their release. Now, you have people coming into Forsyth County, Winston-Salem in particular, from all over the state. So to date, calendar year to date, we have 120 formally released offenders who have actually secured employment here in Winston-Salem. And we want to say that transportation is a large key to that. Part of what we were asking for as well was funds to continue to do short-term skills training, right, which would make them more marketable, and additionally funds for securing valid North Carolina IDs and valid North Carolina driver's license, which would again increase the opportunity for our participants to secure employment.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any direct questions for Mr. Now, we've got 4 of the groups, members of the committee, and I want you to keep in mind that the hour is drawing nigh. Councilmember Burke.
I would like to say we have done a lot of mouth service about reentry, and I feel a program like this can let you say to the person who's coming out, we're here to support you, to help you. And there are certain things that we have to do in order for you to be successful. And you've mentioned 2 of them, transportation and a skill.
Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Yeah, quickly, first want to make sure that my comment wasn't taken out of context in terms of what I meant on the call. Particularly, my concern was more about the workforce development piece and not necessarily about the reentry piece. You know, I don't know if you remember, I had the opportunity to go into a location with you when I worked with Goodwill, so I've seen that firsthand. Question to City Manager, are any of the JARC funds that we just talked about in the Finance Committee used to support any of the reentry programs?
I don't know. Mr. Turner, do you know?
I don't think so.
We'll get that information.
We'll get that information.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go, since we mentioned the first 2, the Salvation Army, and Eureka House, get ready, because you'll go behind the Salvation Army.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
My
you.
name is Matt Linville. I'm the Director of Development for the Salvation Army here in Winston-Salem, representing the RRC program as well. We appreciate the opportunity to apply for this SOAR grant funding. Our approach to the RRC program, since 1974, we have had our RRC program in Winston-Salem working exclusively with the Bureau of Prisons with felons in the last 6 months of their sentence, reintegrating them back into the community, back into their families, and basically housing them, making sure that they are still abiding by everything that they should, as if since they are still in the sentence, last 6 months of their sentence. In our SOAR grant application, we wanted to increase our life skills that we provide those who come through the facility. While they are there, we certainly have the capability and we do enhance their life skills, but it is once they are out that we wanted to have these additional funds where we could continue our outreach to those who have been through, which would be around 200 per year that we put back out into the community, where we are able to help them with school, help them with clothing, all those things that are necessary to increase their hireability, and to continue giving them the confidence that they left with and making sure that stays at its highest point.
Thank you, Mr. Limble. Does anybody have any direct questions for Mr. Limble? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representatives from the Eureka Ministries. And I don't know if I got your name and your address for the record.
Yes, Harold Smith.
But Mr. Smith, if you can give your name and address for the record, we'll double back around to the Salvation Army later.
Okay, all right. I'm Harold Smith, the president of Eureka Ministry. And Eureka Ministry is the parent ministry of Eureka House.
Address, please, sir.
I'm sorry.
Your address, please, sir.
We are at 1452 Emerald Street is what the facility is.
Thank you.
And we've been organized for 12 years, and we primarily provide transitional housing for ex-offenders coming out of prison. And we serve prisons all over North Carolina with transitional housing. Through this grant, we want to provide permanent housing for ex-offenders. And we've done this before with the HPRP grant. We had a grant for a little over $175,000 where we actually placed 40 men and women into permanent housing, and we had we had a success rate of like 40% of inmates that had remained housing, and the retention rate was higher than normal. So, but through this grant, we've asked for, we want to target inmates, ex-offenders who have income, and they're usually living with a relative or a friend, and the friend has told them that they have to leave, or the landlord would say, you've got to leave because you're hurting the person that you're living with as far as their living arrangements and their housing contract. What we plan to do is we'll be meeting with ex-offenders, and we'll sit down with them and we'll do a budget, find out exactly how much rent they can afford. We definitely don't want to put them in a situation where we set them up to fail where they cannot afford to pay rent. So we set up a budget with them and decide, whether you can actually afford to pay marketable rent. We also go with them or go ahead of them and talk to landlords to make sure that the landlord is familiar with this individual, and we try to let them know that doing business with housing ex-offenders is actually a good thing. And a lot of times inmates will go and ex-offenders will go and apply for housing, and they go through the whole process of applying, and they pay the processing fee and all that. And when they get there, they're told that they don't rent to ex-offenders. So we try to eliminate that and go ahead of them. So when we tell them you go to this particular landlord, it's no problem. You don't have to worry about a program. You don't have to worry about an application fee. He's already approved you. So we go ahead of them and make sure that all that's worked out, and so that they can get housing. And ex-offenders, once they can get in permanent housing, the crime rate actually goes down, because without housing, these guys go and they do a lot of things that eventually go back to prison. So the recidivism rate is actually tied to that. So we feel like, and we know, based on what we've done in the past, that housing ex-offenders is a key part to the success of them as well as the city of Winston-Salem. So that's mainly what we want to do for the grant that we requested.
Mr. Smith, I want to first say thank you for the good work that you do and all the other organizations who have spoke before you. So we definitely appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Smith?
I'm just going to make an observation.
Councilmember Burke.
When Mr. Smith got started 12 years ago, he introduced himself and said what his program's going to be about. I questioned that then, how well the behavior and how it would look. And he said, you can be assured that it will look like any other home in the area. And that's what you've done.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Next up, and we'll try to get you to the podium. Give us 2 or 3 good minutes, and we'll try to ask any questions, and we'll get you in and out. Beating up bad habits. You can come up with them. That's fine. Mr. Pilata, give us your name and address. Now my background is with youth in the juvenile justice system. I wanted to do a quick change of pace because I wanted you to hear some of the good things that's going on with some of our young people in the community. Mr. Pilata.
My name is David Vallada. I am with Beating Up Bad Habits. We're taking kids off the streets.
Address, please, sir.
2500 A1 Old Lexington Road. It's a boxing gym. It's a boxing program. We're taking the youth from off the streets, from the court systems. With we're working with Partnership for Drug-Free America. Drug-Free North Carolina. I'm sorry, and teaching the kids a new way of life, responsibility, boxing as a sport, keeping them off the streets, keeping them in a place where it's safe. We're as well helping them with schoolwork, keeping up with their agendas in school, reports and everything. Probation officers, if at any time we feel that a recommendation for professional services as behavior, anger, substance abuse, anger management, parenting, anything is needed, we refer that with agencies. We're trying to get these kids to compete at a professional level with USA Boxing. After training and doing everything that is required by them, we let them compete just because they're showing excellence and they're showing good in school and report cards in the community, probation officers. Now, all of them are in court issues, but have poor peer mediators or in substance areas where they're just doing they're not supposed to be doing. They're using drugs and stuff. And if they excel, they prove everything correct, we're allowing them to compete. And hopefully we got 4 kids from North Carolina that we're trying to promote for 2016 Olympics. So that's something big for us, something big for them. We have to travel as far as Chattanooga, Tennessee, Colorado, Las Vegas. This ain't cheap. Keeping the kids in there is not cheap. I just say thank you to the committee, thank you to the city, to everybody who's helping us. We do fundraisers, we do anything and everything just to keep the doors open for these kids. I don't know what else to say.
No, I think you've said a whole lot, a mouthful. So thank you, Mr. Villado. And I told the committee and the council members you're going to be very happy with this lineup. I think we've done a good job of sifting through self.
Okay.
And he'll tell you a little bit about why he's standing here. If you could get us in and out, sir.
Okay.
Give us your name and address for the record.
Well, my name is Greg Squires, CEO of Self Incorporated, which means self-empowerment lasts forever. What I've done and what my group has done, we've assembled a very well-developed board of people who have a lot of experience. My partner and I, Mr. Larry Worthy, we come from about 35 to 40 years separate of experience in this field, along with work with Urban League, ESR, Teen Court, and a lot of the agencies that are doing some of this same type work. What we found is that while we're not trying to necessarily compete with other reentry programs, we're finding that we've got citizens in Forsyth County who have problems with their criminal record, which means they got problem with housing, and they got problem with other jobs. They don't have a real good skill set on how to maneuver in society. So what we've got is a cycle of people who get kind of a poor job, who don't really know how to make the right maneuvers, and they lose the job, and they get another poor job, and they've never broken that cycle. So whether it means education and or employability skills training and others, we're trying to put the glue to that so that we can have more folks who, and we see them every day, you see them every day. They're veterans. They're somebody's cousin, somebody's friend who might have had a bad break at one point, but now because they've got a history with a criminal record, they have difficulty getting in houses. We link them up. We have difficulty getting another job. We link them up. We have a difficulty trying to leave the job. They don't know how to do that. So there's a soft skill that's required. So what happens is all the skills that everybody at this table has learned and knows, these people don't know. We're trying to give them that. Real quick, to make sure there's no confusion, Self's whole deal in this partnership with the other two organizations is that we're trying to provide what I wish somebody would have provided for me when I first started at Mediation Services in 1986. That means a partner, not another board, not another group to take over, but a partner who can make sure that you have all the things in a row as far as structure, as far as making sure you're doing all the things necessary to satisfy the city requirements. And that's what we're trying to do with breaking bad habits, beating up bad habits, and Southside rides. Our role is going to be pass-through. We are not going to document or do anything specific that would interfere with that board's role. But that's our piece of it.
And we wanted to make sure there's a little bit more oversight when it comes to some of the newer organizations or some of the ones who are not as established as other ones. So we wanted to make sure that we've got good oversight and self-is to pass through. So thank you, Mr. Squires and Mr. Vallata. Speaking of the third organization in the trio, Mr. Dave Moore with Southside Rise. And Mr. Moore, if you can, and as I've said to everybody else, get us in and get us out, sir. Give us your name and address for the record.
All right, thanks for allowing. Address is 2221 Hope Street. That's actually off of Walltown. I wear many hats. I got a program. We got a program that teaches the at-risk how to do auto body custom painting, and the at-risk I'm talking about ages of 12 years old and up. I work with the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court. I work with gang prevention. I have classes in Forsyth Correctional. Used to have them in the jailhouse, but due to county funding, I collaborate with Forsyth Tech, whereas my classes are actually Forsyth Tech classes under the customized training. And we have a big overturn. Like now, for instance, we have about 6 guys in auto body training at the curriculum at Forsyth Tech. You know what I'm saying? So we funnel them through. And the biggest challenge I have to make it pretty much successful, a lot of these young people need finances. So I find a way to pay them stipends off the jobs that I get to help them sustain whatever they're doing, not to break in houses or whatever, because I get a lot of that. I'm a community service work spot too also, you know what I'm saying? So that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you for the good work you do, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
And I think that completes all of the organizations. Members of the committee will move this thing forward. I know there has been a suggestion to move forward without a recommendation, but I feel like, you know, because of all of the due diligence that went into this thing, because we've got the groups here today, if there is no one to make a motion, I'll make a motion to move this forward for approval.
But that was because we had not heard.
Yeah.
This makes a difference. When you hear information, you easily can move something forward.
So is that a second?
She's second, and I. And
All right, we good to go then. All right, it's been motioned and properly second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, that is unanimous. So this will move forward to Monday's agenda, on the consent agenda, to be approved. Item G3 is the second phase of this process. Could you read it, please, ladies?
Item G3, resolution approving a City of Winston-Salem former offender work experience program.
Mr. Evan Riley is recognized for a second time.
Yes. So this is the second half of what is proposed with the $100,000 of SOAR reentry money. This is what we are calling the Winston-Salem, City of Winston-Salem Former Offender Work Experience Program. The purpose of the Work Experience Program is essentially to provide opportunities for gainful employment for local former offenders that meet our program guidelines. And we've outlined, I think we've got 8 program guidelines that you'll see on the second page of that card. What we're proposing is that we employ up to 8 former offenders for a period of 16 weeks in temporary positions, supplementing the city's existing labor force in areas of critical need that include vegetation management, the Code Enforcement Division of Community and Business Development Department, assisting in some of the critical jobs that we have there and could use some additional hands, if you will. So that is essentially the program. I won't go through item by item the criteria unless Chairman Taylor or members of the committee wish me to, but you see it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the program.
Well, there are a lot more specifics to this, Councilmember Burke. You are recognized for discussion.
thank you. We used to, and we still do, we would hire people from referral agencies who had a record. And this city would hire them, but yet still we didn't have a program where we could hire them.
Right.
And I have thought, how can a person become self-sufficient if they don't have anyone to help them? And I think the city should take the lead in something like this. And I think this is a very good program.
Yeah, putting people to work to provide for their families, it definitely reduces crime. It gives people a sense of confidence. So I think we've been extreme good stewards of the $100,000 that have been allocated through the guarantee funding process. And of course, I'm the kind of person that pushes the envelope. We'll try to do something a little bit bigger and better on next year. Councilmember Montgomery.
With, I know it states that the individual will have to go and complete the standard pre-employment screening, which I hope that means also that absent the background, well, I know you do a background check, but absent the normal standard and policy on that. But it does say in terms of the substance abuse side of that. If we have someone who comes through and they fail the substance abuse, they fail the drug test, will there be any lenience in that process, or will there be any referrals to any support service or anything for individuals that come through that? Because if the intent of this is to help support them, if they are dealing with some substance abuse, will we have anything to at least attempt to assist them to be connected, or at least depending upon what type of substance, the opportunity to work through something with that?
Certainly, if we're considering an applicant for entry into this program and we get to that point and they happen to fail the drug test, we certainly wouldn't want to just cut them loose. We'd certainly try to refer them to an agency. I'll tell you, one of the stipulations of this program is that they have come to us having completed a job skills training program, and by including that stipulation, our hope is that they come to us job ready. So if an individual has shown the initiative to complete one of those programs, you certainly hope that along the way, substance abuse issues have kind of been addressed by virtue of their training when they come to us as an applicant, but we certainly would not want to.
Who would be conducting that job readiness? Would that be a part of this program, or are you saying some other agency successfully completing their readiness program?
It would be the agencies, actually many of the ones that you've heard here speak tonight, individuals who have come through some of those programs would be referred to us for participation in our work program.
Yeah, and over I say on the drug piece, because sometimes you have functioning individuals who they can go through that whole process and then get to that place and still have issues. So how do we deal in that? So at least just a thought as we move forward with that.
And I know council members have asked the question, why are we paying people, or why are we supporting skills training? And I think making sure that that's a qualification to participate in this program kind of connects all of the dots. And secondly, Partnership for a Drug-Free NC, Mr. Riley, as you are aware, is another organization who we can make the referral to, Councilmember Montgomery, if problems arise along those lines. Does anyone else wish to be heard on this matter?
I'm just going to make this statement. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
We've had agencies that this city supported. And I made a statement some years ago, and they can pull it out of the minutes. Agencies like Bethesda. We had Goodwill. What's that other one? And they were working with people, but they were not really treating them like humans who could gain their self-confidence and get back out into the world. They were seemingly going through a motion. They did not have what I call concrete programs to lift them up. And I say every day you go on Patterson Avenue, from early 8 a.m. to the p.m., they're walking and eating without no programs. And so I think what we have here today is something that's going to move us in a direction where we can see, are we just talking? These people who've been before us, are they just talking? Their accountability. We expect to see some results. We expect to see people, as they would say, in a job with their skills and moving up in that job to higher salaries. Because we cannot continue to think that people can live on minimum wages. They still will be defeated. So we're going to have to, and I would say to you, Mr. Chairman, you should be commended for pushing, and you really didn't have to push because we wouldn't have supported it if we did not believe in it. But we need to have some way that we monitor this, Mr. Evans. So we're, after so many months, we want to come back and hear the progress, and we just have confidence that it would be good progress.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Riley, the request is to be updated frequently, I guess bi-monthly or so, or quarterly. We'll figure that out. But as soon as you can get us an update, we'd appreciate it for the first update, and we'll set a mark on how we want to move forward. Is there any, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, just for the purposes of kind of setting expectations of when we'd actually get this off the ground, we're looking at this for implementation probably in the spring of next year, because that's really our busy season when we have high grass, graffiti starts to show up in abundance, and so we're thinking about April, sort of early spring, bringing these individuals in. So just wanted to kind of have you know that in terms of program start date.
And I love the fact that we're partnering with other organizations, but I particularly like the fact that we're taking on this process ourselves and not only talking about make a difference, but actually putting our money where our mouth is and our feet to the grindstone and actually making a difference. Councilmember Light and Councilmember Montgomery.
No, I agree that this is, it sounds like a great program, and I'll be very interested to watch the progress.
Thank you. Councilmember Montgomery.
And the question I had in starting in April, around that time frame, based upon what's budgeted with the $50,000, would we be looking in the future to continue at the eight individuals, or with that timeline, does it afford the opportunity to potentially have more for this cycle than you would normally have on a normal cycle based upon the funding?
The funding provides for up to, as we've structured the program, so it's 16 weeks of employment for up to 8 individuals. With the $50,000, that's essentially how much labor that amount buys us. So that maintains, if this fiscal year or next, that's what it gets us regardless.
Okay. Gotcha.
We'll go to our city manager and then come to Councilmember McIntosh.
I was just going to add, I wanted to thank Ms. Peoples Joyner and Mr. Riley and the Chairman Taylor. This program, I believe, will be a win-win-win. We will provide meaningful employment at a livable wage of $10.10 an hour. We will address some of the critical issues that many of you talk about, litter, graffiti. And the third win is if we improve those neighborhoods, as we've all talked about, and remove some of that blight, it helps the area grow. It reduces crime. I think we will be back here by next budget cycle asking for more money for a larger program.
I'm certain of it. Councilmember Burke.
And this sounds good. Now, say for instance, excuse me.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Michael.
Another win to add to that, in my opinion, could potentially be some wrapping some historic preservation into it. We're tearing down houses. We're looking for housing for people. Put those two things together. My question would be, if this is successful, can we get outside funding for it? Are there opportunities there?
I think we will certainly look.
Yeah.
I was thinking we need to be able to show a success story.
Yes, ma'am.
And that success story would be if we train individuals, then some of these individuals need to be transferred to private companies when we talk about this partnership. And then, Mr. McIntosh, I don't know which way you're thinking about housing, but we have housing. We have houses that we are tearing down, that if what we could actually do, take one of the citizens who's in the job force, put them in one of those houses, get it fixed up. You see, we're talking here, but we're going to have to be able to show this.
Yes,
and if you can show this city that here we have an individual that we have trained, then here's this individual in a better job than what we started, then help them to get into a home. And we have houses that we can do this. In neighborhoods where we are looking at some of the houses that are just sitting there and we're tearing them down and they're too nice to be torn down. They could get in there, take housing, and fix them up.
Councilmember Light.
Yes, that's one of my objections, what has been one of my objections to the laws the way they are currently, that one, to take a property, unfortunately, you have to board it up for 2 years and let it sit there and rot before you can actually take it and use it for, not-for-profit purpose. So hopefully we can do something better than that.
Mr. Brooks is working on something right now. You'll be hearing about it soon.
Yeah.
We may be able to.
And the longer we talk about this program, it continues to grow by the minute. And, it's going to be a behemoth after a while. So if all comments and questions are concerned, does anybody from the audience need to say anything? If not, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. The last item on the agenda is item G4.
Item G4.
Madam City Secretary.
Resolution approving the Solomon Drive Traffic Calming Plan for funding and construction in the East Ward.
No. I'm just,
Oh, we're on item G4. That is an approval of a resolution approving the Solomon Drive traffic calming plan for funding, and this construction is proposed to be done in the East Ward. Mr. Greg Turner is recognized for a brief presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, City Council adopted a policy on traffic calming several years ago. You revised it somewhat recently to put in some allowances for the council member of the ward to have a veto over vertical traffic calming devices. The residents of Pecan Ridge and the surrounding neighborhood have approached the city about, since Pecan has been closed, installing traffic calming devices on Solomon Drive, which has now become the default major access to the community. They requested vertical traffic calming devices, also known as speed humps or speed humps. In conversation with the school system and with the fire department, there was a concern about those devices causing problems or operational issues for them. So staff is recommending that instead of speed humps, that speed pillows or speed cushions, which are straddleable, which can be straddled by fire trucks and by school buses, be installed. We have installed these, and actually in Councilmember Burke's ward, and have had positive results with them. Therefore, staff is recommending those devices to satisfy the neighborhood's desire for traffic calming. The neighborhood, incidentally, has complied with the city's policy on meeting, having a final decision, and making that recommendation to the staff.
Well, members of the committee and council members, we received correspondence, as we all know, from two particular individuals. One of those individuals is Mr. Fritz Carrier, who lives in the community. He expressed his support for the traffic calming measure, and the other correspondence was from Councilmember Bessie, who expressed a few concerns about this particular matter. I will let you know that this item will also be considered on tomorrow in Public Works, and I will definitely tender the councilman of the area.
Mister, I'm moving for approval. I feel it's something that needs to be done, and that's a very workable, hard-working neighborhood. They're taking a leadership with many things, and I think they should know their neighborhood, what they need, better than I would know it, and the council person would know what they needed if that's his recommendation.
All right.
Move for approval.
Well, we've got a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motion and second. Is there discussion?
Question.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Are we approving speed humps, speed pillows? What's the technical?
Speed pillows.
Okay.
I think there was concerns from public safety personnel, which is why they went from humps to pillows.
Right. Okay.
Councilman Montgomery, it's your ward.
Yeah, I just reiterate what Councilman Burke has already stated. Mr. Carey is unable to be here tonight. He had something that conflicted with him, and he wanted to be here, but he will be present on Monday night at council along with other members of the community. As we know, the Union Cross area has seen a lot of development taking place in that area. Pecan Ridge neighborhood, which abuts to the back of where Solomon Drive is, has run into many issues, and they've been successful in seeing a decrease in some of the issues they had along with speeding. And Solomon Drive has turned, for many of them, into what they describe as a racetrack of sorts in terms of people speeding up to get through up to the other side. I know there is also the thinking and the thought that when the construction is over, that will alleviate the issue that's there. But we don't take into consideration that we have approved, I believe, almost 200 units of housing to be built right there along Solomon Drive on the backhand side, along with an additional commercial space and potentially a hotel to be placed there on the side, which will increase even more the type of traffic that's along within that neighborhood. And so based upon the requests of the neighbors and the community who live there, I think that this will help protect them and protect their children and grandchildren as they have requested.
All right, and I know that Councilmember Burke has spoken, Councilmember Montgomery, the Councilmember of the area has spoken. I, for one, would definitely like to hear from the community before I make a decision. We want to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the community. We also want to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of public safety, and hopefully those two will line up. But this item will be considered tomorrow in Public Works. It's been motion, properly second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
I will abstain, so that's 3 in favor, 1 abstention. That completes our consent and our general agendas. Is there anything else that should be discussed for the good of the order? If nothing, we will now consider this meeting to be adjourned.